What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. Very happy to say we have another guest on today, FPL Raptor, aka Ross, aka Stormzy's best friend. How are you doing, Ross?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on the channel, Andy. I've been watching the content for years, so always a pleasure coming on and chatting to you.
Yeah, second time you've been on now, I think. So glad to have you
Yep.
here. What we're going to do, usual stuff, we're going to take a look through the draft. Obviously, at this point in preseason, a lot of the players are quite similar. So we're going to focus on the ones that we're not seeing in too many drafts. And then we're going to answer some of your questions as well. I think I've taken down 6 in total. So there should be plenty of good stuff in this one. If you enjoy it, give it a like. Otherwise, we will jump into it. Let's take a look at the draft. You're in a, if I can pull it up here, you're in a 3-5-2. I actually ran it quickly through the Fantasy Football Hub My Team tool, which I'm sure you've done. It came out at 93% today. I know the percentages change sometimes because they're messing with stuff in the background. So pretty decent. 3-5-2, loads of midfielders to choose from. Do you see yourself coming off that formation?
Yeah, I was discussing this the other day. So I genuinely do believe that a 4-4-2 is the kind of safest, most flexible formation to start the season. Last year, I got off to an absolute flyer in a 4-4-2. And I had a really strong back line. I had the likes of Trippier, Cancelo, James. I really liked it. And I feel like it's just a sensible way to start the season. But this season in particular, not only do I feel like there are just so many good midfielders to choose from, I feel like a lot of them are at similar price points. And I think I want a £6.5 million price point. I want a 7.5 price point. I want an 8.5. And once I get all of those players in, I'm almost always having at least 5 midfielders that I want to choose from. And to be honest, I could probably have like 15 midfielders if it'd allow us. So yeah, at the moment, despite me thinking 4-4-2 is probably the better formation, I'm on a 3-5-2 a lot of the time.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly how I've started the last couple of seasons, but at least one or two of them I've gone 4-4-2 as well, especially with like the attacking defenders. I think the problem this year, and it's maybe one thing that we haven't really spoken about that much, is the way that FPL have priced the midfielders. We don't have like an Andreas Pereira at 4.5 either. So if you do skip to that formation, you've almost got to go up to 5 or 5.5, and then it's kind of reducing some of the benefit to playing that formation. I do think if anyone wants to go Trent, Salah and Haaland, that's probably the way they'll have to go. But I don't think people are kind of ready for that. And like you said, there's so many midfielders, could easily have like 10, 15 in there. 4.5 million goalkeeper, always popular between FPL managers. You've gone for Johnston. Obviously, we're really far out from game week 1, etc. That could change. Crystal Palace is a defence that I haven't really thought about too much. But when I looked at their defensive numbers the other day, they're really solid from last year. They're like 5th best expected goals conceded. Is that why you're thinking about Johnston?
Yeah, Crystal Palace just flew under the radar as a team last year. I mean, they finished 11th. They had a really solid season considering that they sacked the manager mid-season too. And I feel like consistently now for a couple of years, the defense has been really strong. And I look at the personnel within the defense and I can only see it getting stronger. The likes of Anderson, Gahey, Mitchell, and Johnston in goal, because I think he will be first choice ahead of Gaeta. So I feel like they will continue to be a top half of the table defence. And they've got really decent opening fixtures. It's a bit of a mixed bag, but if you're going to keep your goalkeeper until, let's say, game week 10 or 11, when we tend to wildcard, I really like Johnston. And I feel like Crystal Palace are just being completely ignored. And I also like that he's got a decent fixture on the opening day because you want to try and get as many points as possible in game week 1. So yeah, at the moment, I think Johnston, then probably Flecken are my favourite 2 4.5s.
Yeah, and if you do get lucky where you don't need to wildcard that early, the fixtures like game week 11 onwards, I'm looking now, Burnley away, Everton at home, Luton away, West Ham away, Bournemouth home. I mean, most of us aren't going to get to game week 15 before we use the first wildcard, but if you do, the fixtures are pretty decent. And I also think Palace are one of those teams where you probably wouldn't want any of their defenders. They're just not that exciting. None of them are particularly good goal threat. So that's probably just a nice way to cover the defence. And I guess you've also got Estepinian, so going for a Brighton double up. Any interest in that?
I'm actually starting to think I might not want any Brighton assets to start the season.
None. Not even
I know,
Estepinian.
I know the fixtures are excellent, but the more I look at it, the more I just think they're going to be in Europe. Obviously, at the start of the season, that won't be an issue, but they have also lost McAllister. It looks like they're going to lose Caicedo. I just worry a little bit that going forward, that's going to impact them in the build-up play. And also defensively, that will probably impact them too. They've lost the bulk of their midfield. And I think what was so strong about them was the spine of their team. And I also do think that Estepinian will continue to be ever such a slight rotation risk as well, especially with Lamptey coming back in. He can play on the left too. So I probably will end up starting with Estepinian or at least one Brighton asset, but that's why at the moment there's only one Brighton asset in my team. And I also just think that there are so many attackers in that team, like March, Matoma, Buonanotte, Welbeck, Ferguson, João Pedro. Like it just goes on and on and on. And even Pascal Gross can play in an attacking role. So at the moment, I'm starting to think it could be a little bit of a trap going for like 2 or 3 Brighton assets, but I'll probably regret that because they've got Luton at home in game week 1.
Yeah, I do think sometimes like I definitely get caught in this. It's almost like how you view the fixture block. So when you look at Brighton's opening 6, they look pretty good because you've got Luton, like you said, opening day. Game week 6 is Bournemouth at home. But actually, after the first 3, it's not that great. Like Newcastle home, okay, it's a home fixture. Brighton defence is pretty good, but Newcastle is strong. Then it's an away game to Man United, not great. Bournemouth at home is decent. Then it's Villa away. There's actually a question about their attack in a minute. We know that's pretty good. Liverpool attack is good. Then it's Man City away. So actually, after the first 3, you almost get into a little bit of an issue. I guess with Estupiñán versus the attackers you mentioned, is you can at least rotate him because he's not too expensive. But yeah, I can't remember who's in my current draft right now, but I don't think I've got any Brighton attackers either for similar reasons. I just think there might be slightly better options. I mean, you've got Mbomo instead of a Matoma. You've just mentioned why you haven't got the Brighton players. What do you like about Mbomo?
Yeah, I'm going back and forth here because Mbomo and Matoma have got almost identical non-penalty expected goal involvement last season. I think it's actually exactly the same. So by all accounts, very, very similar data last season. I looked into it a little bit more and spoke to some Brentford fans. I didn't also realise that Mbomo is on pretty much all corners and some free kicks too. And he's likely to be on penalties in the absence of Tony. And because he's playing a slightly different role, maybe more of a talisman, his data might improve. It's just all starting to stack up. And in a completely opposite way to what we're getting with Brighton, I feel like it's that first fixture is putting so many people off of the Brentford assets because after game week 1, the fixtures are actually exceptionally good for Brentford. And that's why at the moment I've got Mbomo and Henry because I feel like they are, by all accounts, probably a 10th or 9th place side you would expect. Even in the absence of Tony, I think they'll have a strong start to the season. And I don't want to get blindsided by that first fixture and just think it's not a great opening fixture, so I don't want any Brentford assets. So just because of penalties, slightly more talismanic in the absence of Tony, set pieces and really decent data, I think Mbomo might be my favourite £6.5 million mid at the moment.
Yeah, I think he's mine as well. Although, to be honest, I didn't know that either. I didn't realise he was on so many set pieces. I knew he would get penalties without Tony there, or it looked pretty likely, but I didn't know everything else. Also, I can't remember, I haven't gone and checked it now, but didn't Brentford also smash Spurs like 3-1 at the end of last season? That was without Tony as well. So, yeah, it's not necessarily that bad of a fixture. They're just a pretty good attacking team, so I like him too. I put out a draft the other day, and I'm pretty sure I also had Fernandes and Rashford. Double Man United. Some people kind of mention the fixtures. I think they're all right, especially from an attacking point of view. Have you got any kind of thoughts about changing one of them to someone else? Or I guess what I'm getting at is which still a long way away from game week 1, but are some of these players starting to pretty much be locked in, barring injuries and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think quite a lot are locked in. I am slightly worried about the Manchester United double attack. I mean, we're both Manchester United fans. We won quite a few games by like 1-0, 2-1. We didn't score a lot of goals last season. And I struggle to remember many games that we put 3 or 4 goals past teams. So I do worry that I'm going for a double attack when the fixtures aren't that fantastic. I mean, we've got 2 good home games in the opening 3, but I am starting to think, is that a little bit overkill? The players that I don't currently have in my midfield that I would love James Maddison because I feel like he'll be very, very good at Spurs under Postecoglou. And the other one is Martinelli. I genuinely have had him maybe over 50% of my drafts. I've dropped Gabriel from that defence and I've had the Arsenal triple up in attack of Martinelli, Saka and Jesus because Arsenal are a team that you could see putting 3 or 4 goals past teams, whereas I don't think Manchester United are. But what I'm trying to do is ignore the fact that they're both from United and just say, is Fernandes a good option? Yes. Is Rashford a good option? Yes. And I'm trying to consider them as completely separate players and not think of it as a double up. So at the moment, I've got them both. But if I were to drop one, it would be Fernandes. I do think that Rashford is worth the extra 0.5 over Fernandes.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same thing for me. It's not that I necessarily think they're like essential or anything like that. It's just when you compare them to other players, it's difficult to find someone that's obviously better. Like Song could be. There's actually a question about him, I think, later on, and I'm sure like he could be someone that could come in for Rashford. But I don't think there's anyone where people could say, I guarantee you that player is better. Like we know you're going to get nailed on minutes from both of them. Obviously, Fernandes is on penalties. You're right about the goals. I'm just looking on the Premier League table last year. Man United were pretty awful, actually. 58 goals. That was 30 behind Arsenal, 10 behind Newcastle. Liverpool scored 75. Brighton scored 72. So in terms of an attacking team, it's not quite there for Man United. I guess with those two as well, if Man United are going to score, even if it's a low-scoring game, it's probably going to be them. Like, you know, Mason Mount's probably not going to come in and nick a lot of the goals. I guess it just depends on what striker ends up coming in. There's a lot of talk about Højlund, for example. Maybe that will affect things a little bit. But I think for me, I don't know if you agree, they're kind of players where you kind of know what you're getting, and Fernandes in particular is just one that I could see myself just downgrading at some point when whoever makes themselves obvious as a better option, basically.
Yeah, and I should note this draft has 1 million in the bank, So
Oh, nice.
if I want to go from Fernandes to Son straight away, I'd still have 0.5 in the bank. Or if, for example, I want to upgrade in Burmo to Maddison. So this is a team that has a little bit in the bank. But I do like the idea of starting with money in the bank. I did the same last season. I started with 1 million in the bank, and it allowed me to go from, I think it was Leon Bailey to Pascal Gross in game week 4, whereas a lot of people couldn't make that move because Gross had already gone up in price and they didn't have anything in the bank. So I do like the idea of starting with money in the bank, and I feel like it, especially because there's a bit of a game week 3 fixtures wing, it will leave you a little bit more flexible, whereas other managers will start having to take hits to get the players they want. So I feel like it's in a good position, but to be honest, I am changing this daily, and I'm sure it'll be completely different tomorrow.
Yeah, but I think sometimes, like, if I looked at that team, obviously without going and adding it up, I wouldn't have thought to myself, "There's a million in." I think that's sometimes, a million left. So I think that's sometimes quite a good sign. If you've got a team you're happy with, then yeah, why not start with money in the bank? Foden, 7.5 million. I'm kind of starting to come around to him a little bit, especially with the outgoings. Like obviously Mahrez is going. I think a lot of people think Foden's going to go and play on the right, and I'm not convinced that's going to happen. But if Bernardo Silva goes and plays there like he was last year, that obviously frees up a spot in midfield. So, is it just a fixtures thing? Like I know Foden's not going to be locked in yet, but I don't know. How much are you liking him right now?
I'd say Foden's 90% locked in for me.
Really?
Yeah,
I'm that confident about his minutes.
I'm a massive Foden fanboy. So last season on my game week 8 wildcard, I had Foden. He was 3% owned, and he was the one that shot me up to 500 in the world. So I've got a real soft spot for him. And I just think that he's too good to sit on the bench with the sales that they've made and with the lack of purchase at the moment. I can't see him having another season where he sits a lot on the bench. And we have to remember last season, I think he started the opening 12 or 13 games in a row for Man City, and he just went on that massive streak of starting and then he got benched. But I do think he's first choice. And as you say, it doesn't really matter where Bernardo Silva plays, because if Silva plays on the right, then there's a spot in midfield. If Silva plays in midfield, then all of a sudden there's a spot on the right. So I do think that he'll get minutes early on, and I just love the fixtures. And everyone's got Haaland. Man City have the best fixtures in the league. They are the best team in the league. They score the most goals in the league. I want a piece of that action outside of Haaland. So
that's a good
at the moment, Foden's down. He's got good goal threat as well consistently across the last 3 or 4 seasons. His underlying data is really, really strong.
Yeah, there's some players out there that as soon as they get minutes, they are just good options, and that is Phil Foden. I think a lot of people are expecting De Bruyne to be injured at the start. There's kind of rumours going around about that. So obviously we'll wait and see what happens in pre-season. But if De Bruyne is out, there's only, unless I'm missing someone, and Bernardo Silva's playing on the right, there's only really Kovacic, Foden and Alvarez that would play in those kind of number 8 positions. And obviously Kovacic is new to the team. Alvarez is, he has played there, but I don't know if it's his best position. So yeah, I think Foden's one of those players that I could be sold on. I'm not quite there yet, but as we get closer to game week 1, definitely someone to think about. Last question about the draft. The bench is fairly cheap. Obviously 4.5 million forward. Everyone's going to have one of them if it's 3-5-2. We're all waiting to see if someone gets minutes. And then you got a 4 million defender and a 4.5. Do you like kind of starting with the cheaper bench? Do you have any thoughts into kind of putting that money that you said left over to upgrade a bit?
Yeah, I think if you've got access to the data from last season, go back to your game week 1 teams if you're watching this and count how many times you needed your second and third sub. And it's very, very rare. The only times it tends to happen is if there's a massive rotation as a result of something weird happening, or there's like a postponement or something like that, or it's a double game week and you get some injuries. But generally speaking, the players that are benched tend to come on anyway, and you don't tend to need more than your first sub. And even so, in this case, we're hoping there'll be a £4 million defender that emerges as starting. And at the moment, Bell looks pretty good. So I think having a really strong first sub in Henry, who after game week 1's fixtures are excellent, and then having Bell, who should get some minutes as your second sub, I think that's well and truly enough. So I would advocate not spending too much money on your bench. But make sure that you've got one sub that you're happy coming on most weeks. And in this case as well, Henry rotates really nicely with both Estepinian and Luke Shaw. So if you don't want to play, like you said, Estepinian in game week 4, 5, 6, you can rotate Henry in for those fixtures. So I like him for those reasons.
Nice, good stuff. All right, let's move on to some of the questions, which Ross hasn't seen beforehand, by the way. So I'm just going to spring them on him. I'm sure they're not that complicated. So the first one is, hang on, I need to go back to your draft. Oh yeah, you got Jesus up front, 8 million. So is Ollie Watkins being overlooked as a set and forget option who's nailed for 90 minutes for a good attacking team? Obviously, he's the same price as Jesus. You've got that price point in your team. Are you looking to, any thoughts about going elsewhere, or is Jesus kind of the one at that price point for game week 1?
I think I will be going in with Jesus just because the fixtures are slightly better for Arsenal. The data's much better for Jesus. And again, I just feel like he has the opportunity to haul. I mean, I love Ollie Watkins. He's one of my favorite players of all time in FPL. 2 seasons ago, I owned him for 27 game weeks out of 38. Like, I loved him. I thought he was an excellent player. And that was when he wasn't even particularly good. I just think that his ceiling isn't very high. Like, if you look at his returns most weeks, he ticks along with a 5, 6, 7 pointer. He's not particularly great for bonus points, even when he does tend to score. And whilst I do expect Villa to continue to improve under Emery, I just feel like Jesus is a slightly higher upside, more explosive pick to start the season. And I do like the price point where you can switch to Watkins, you can go to Nkunku, you could go all the way down to a Ferguson, Calvert-Lewin, Wissa. There are so many options. So it just feels like a safe yet explosive option to start with Gabriel Jesus for me.
Yeah, I think I prefer him as well. I mean, one thing with Ollie Watkins is he is possibly on penalties, but as you said to me on Twitter, Tielemans is a better penalty taker. He's probably going to get good minutes. And also, Watkins is a bit like Mitrovic. You like that he's on penalties, but you don't like watching him take them because he's not got a great record. So we don't know whether he will keep them going into game week 1. I'm looking at the fixtures for Villa. I mean, again, it all comes down to your perception of what's a difficult fixture. But in the first 6 game weeks, they've got 4 away games, and 3 of them are Newcastle, Liverpool, and Chelsea. Now, I know what people are going to say. Liverpool and Chelsea, not necessarily great all of last season defensively. But when I think about picking an attacker, they are not the kind of fixtures that I want to look at. To be fair, in the first 5, they've also got Everton at home, Burnley away, and Crystal Palace at home. So again, it really depends how far along you're looking. But I just like those first 3 fixtures for Arsenal, like 2 home games. What are they, Fulham and Nottingham Forest or something like that? For me, it's just too good to turn down. I know people get frustrated with Jesus because he does get a lot of chances. He never puts away as many as he gets. But if he keeps getting that many, the goals do come. So I find it difficult to go to Watkins. But I agree with you. At some point, he will be an option. Maybe even from game week 8, 9, the fixtures get really good for Aston Villa. So, yeah, we'll see about that one. Question number 2. If you had to pick one player, I guess you've already got him in your draft, but if you had to pick one player from the newly promoted sides to feature in your team, I think the original question said regularly, who would it be? Anyone you're eyeing up outside of Bell at Luton?
I've got my own Morris. I know a lot of people looking at that as like a cheaper striker option, but to be honest, no, I'd rather wait and see because in my draft, apart from the cheaper defenders, I don't need a cheaper spot. I think FPL is priced in such a way these days that you don't really ever need your third striker. And you can get 7 solid attackers plus a good defense without having to invest in these really cheap assets. We don't need the likes of an Andreas Pereira at £4.5 million midfielder. So I've not really looked elsewhere other than Bell and Bayer, the 2 £4 million, and maybe Baldock. I mean, really, I'm just looking at all of those £4 million defenders. But I'm interested to see in pre-season if someone does emerge, especially a cheaper striker, and maybe you have them as your third forward and you can rotate them in at certain fixtures, then I don't mind the sound of that. But no, not particularly.
Yeah, I think Morris that you mentioned is someone I've looked at because there's a few forwards around 6 million. Wissa, Calvert-Lewin, Ferguson. I've got slight, I wouldn't say doubts about them. There's question marks over all of them, I think. So Morris for 5.5, who's on penalties, could be a good option. But of course now, Luton are blanking in game week 2, and that fixture was Burnley at home. So they've just lost a really good fixture. So it is pretty annoying. The other player that I'm looking at possibly is Adebayo from Luton, just because he's 5 million. So possibly if you go for one of those formations where you've got that third striker, but you kind of wish... Sorry, you might have to use them at some point, then spending that extra 0.5 might be worth it. But I suspect when I end up on my Game Week 1 team, he will not be in there. But no. Yeah, otherwise, like you said, otherwise it's just the 4 million defenders, I think, right now. All right, let's go to the next one. Beyond Haaland, who are the next 2 FPL essentials? Now, I know everyone hates the word essential, so I'll just say, outside of Haaland, who are the next 2 players on your team who are definitely not going anywhere?
I think Saka and one-off Fernandes or Rashford has been in every single... I haven't dropped that from a single draft. At the moment, I would say Saka and Rashford, but there is a small chance that I go in without Rashford and Bruno instead. But definitely Saka's staying in. I mean, he's on pens, he's nailed. I think he'll continue to improve. Data was a bit rubbish last season. The underlying data's pretty poor for him consistently, but he does tend to overperform slightly, and I like him. And then, one of Rashford and Fernandes. It just feels like they're priced a million too little. Like, if you'd have told me Rashford was 9.510, Bruno was 9.5, Saka was 9.5, I would still probably have all of them. I still think they're that good of an option. So at their current prices, they're pretty locked in for me.
Yeah, I know a lot of people like Odegaard and Marseille, but I just think Saka at 8.5 just can't be ignored. Like, you take the penalties, and even if his numbers are slightly lower, like, he always plays and he always gets good minutes compared to everyone else. So I would say he's probably second for me. I don't know who my third most nailed is after Haaland. I suspect it might be Gabriel. I can't see me going without him. Just because I'm just not convinced I'll go for triple Arsenal attack. So I'm going to say Saka and Gabriel for me. All right, flying through these. I love it. Here we go. I thought there was a question about Son. Have either of you considered Son? I'm sure we both have. Goes on to say, I've tried it on, and I'll be honest, it feels nice. So I guess for us, it would probably, unless you've got $1 million in the bank, so you could upgrade from Fernandes. But for me, it would be Rashford or Son. Like, I said this when I talked to Praz. Spurs are one of those teams I think a lot of us are waiting to see in pre-season. What would Son have to do for you to go for him? Or is it just a case of you're going to wait and see how they do and then target that fixture swing?
Yeah, Son can. There's not a lot Son could do for me, I think, in pre-season to want him. There's a couple of reasons for that. The fixtures I don't really like over the opening two. Pre-season for me doesn't mean as much as it does to other people. I don't really trust it too much. We saw with Neto last year, so many attacking returns in pre-season. He didn't score a single goal in the Premier League last season.
He got 2 assists all season. It was I fell into that trap as well.
Yeah, and I was exactly the same as well. But I just think that pre-season doesn't tell us that much. And I think that for game week 3 onwards, as long as you do have a Bruno or a Rashford and a Saka in your team, if you've got a few spots there, it's relatively easy with either money in the bank or 2 moves to make that switch. And he's going to be so lowly owned that I just can't envision it really damaging you early. Yes, it could massively shoot you up, but I can't imagine it will damage your rank. And I think Spurs are one of those teams, in comparison to Man United and Arsenal, there is a real difference between Son and Maddison. You've got 1.5 million, whereas with Rashford and Bruno, you're saving 0.5, or Saka and Martinelli, you're saving 0.5. If you want a Spurs attacker, Maddison at 7.5, it looks too good. And Kulusevski at 7 could even be a really nice option. He might be nailed under Postecoglou. So I feel like there are just too many options that are a little bit cheaper than Son to warrant starting the season. But of course, I've considered it. There's a small chance, but yeah, you'd have to absolutely go ballistic, I suppose, in pre-season.
Yeah, there is a question about pre-season coming, actually, which you kind of touched on already, which is interesting. I tend to agree. I don't know if there's much he can do other than I just decide by game week 1 that I just want him. I think for me, I would want him as well as Saka, Rashford and Fernandes. I don't think I would want him instead of any of them. And then the kind of draft I would have to put together for that, I'm just not sure I like that much. I know there's all the talk already coming out that, you know, he had hernia issues, he doesn't have them now, that was part of the problem, and that could well be something that, you know, means he absolutely smashes it now because he's injury free, new manager. I don't know, I'm really tempted because you know he can outscore 9 million, and I think there's a kind of pull in FPL to try and get ahead of everyone else. And so if he, like, you know you've thought about him, so if he does smash it Brentford away in game week 1, you're going to wish you just started with him. That's kind of on my mind, but I know that's not the right way to play. So I'm not sure I'm going to start with him either, but I won't lie, I can be susceptible to a little bit of pre-season form. So if he starts outscoring Kane... Here's a quick question for you, actually, that someone asked Praz when he was on. If Kane goes, does that make Son better or worse for you?
Worse.
You reckon? Yeah, okay. I think everyone said that.
Comfortably for me, yeah. I just think a lot of what he does is due to Kane's excellence dropping deep.
True, yeah.
And I feel like that's where Son excels. So yeah, I think it would make him a worse option for me.
I can't remember what it was now, but obviously Son's been around for a long time, and there have been periods where he's played up front and he's been excellent. Now I can't remember exactly how many games that is, but I feel like for me I'd be slightly more tempted without Kane. I also think Son would get penalties, so I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if he does go to Bayern Munich. There's a bit of chat, although most of the chat seems to be coming from Bayern Munich, so I don't know what's going to happen there. And I think most people would probably just go to Richarlison if Kane goes for 7 million. All right. Yeah, okay. Who are good players you think we should be considering under 6 million? Now, I know from your draft there's not really any spots for them, but let's say somebody needs a player under 6 million, and we'll ignore defenders because there's loads of good ones there. Let's talk about attackers, midfielders and forwards. Is there anyone you're looking at outside of maybe Morris at Luton, who you've already mentioned?
Yeah, there's 2 midfielders. Obviously, NC, so I've got my eye on. It just really comes down to minutes, but his expected goal involvement was about 0.8 last season, which, if you're not into data, it was better than Matoma, March, Welbeck, Ferguson. It was the best of all of the Brighton attackers. So I've got my eye on him if he can strike up enough minutes in pre-season. He looks like his first choice. The issue is that João Pedro is now signed, and a lot of people predicting João Pedro to play as the striker, but I think he's been signed for that number 10 role to play as like a second striker alongside one of Welbeck and Ferguson. So I just don't think Enciso will get enough minutes through the middle, and then you've got obviously March and Matoma on the wings. And then Madueke at Chelsea. As far as I can see at the moment, they do look like they're going to make another signing for the right wing. But at the moment, Madueke looks like he's their only real right-sided player. They can play Sterling there, but I feel like at 5.5, even if he doesn't start every game, you're probably unlikely to want a Chelsea triple up anyway. So he's not really blocking you from any moves at the moment. And I feel like he's just at 5.5. If he does get similar chances to the likes of a Sterling and he can score goals, and Pochettino does really like to get his wingers scoring goals, I do like the idea of Madueke. So they'd probably be my two favourite options below 6 million at the moment.
Yeah, that's a good shout. And you already mentioned it right at the start of the video that Brighton have got so many attackers now. Like even if João Pedro has been signed to play the number 10, and I agree that's probably where he's going to play, which then makes Enciso an issue. There could be games where he just plays Ferguson and Undav or Ferguson and Welbeck. Like he has played two forwards together as well. So it's just, I think Brighton are potentially a team where there's loads of value, but it could be a bit of a headache. There could be a bit of rotation, especially when Europe starts, because of the fixture congestion last year, which was basically weekend game, midweek, weekend game, which is like playing in Europa League. There was so much rotation, and De Zerbi even mentioned that the players are going to have to start getting used to this if they want to play in Europe. I think he was saying it about players like Mitoma. I'm not really... I think if I was going to go under 6 million, it would be for those spots I already mentioned, where I want like a £5 million player. I know there's like Cliver at Bournemouth. Some people are starting to talk about, but Bournemouth's opening fixtures aren't too great. Like I actually put João Pedro and Enciso on the graphics, like McNeil, but I just can't get excited about that. I just feel like you've got 5 midfield slots. Most of us could fill 10. Like, why would I want to put someone like that in? So it's like Adebayo, Clivert, players like that at 5 million that I'd be looking at. Obviously not Declan Rice. One player I saw in a draft the other day, who I've kind of ignored completely, is Andreas Pereira. If Mitrovic goes, he's probably on penalties. We know he's going to play every week. His underlying numbers are not that bad. But it just feels like 5.5 is just too much to spend. It's just not a good way. Yeah, I think I'd rather, like you said earlier, just have 4-4-2 and just put an extra 5.5 million defender in, to be honest.
I think the only time I have had Enciso or Madueke in my draft is when I'm trying to get Salah, Trent, and Haaland. You almost have to go 4-4-2 plus having an Enciso type player in there. And this is the reason that none of us are looking at Salah, Trent, and Haaland at the moment, because it just feels like overkill. And it's so much of your budget on 3 players.
If you put one of Salah or Trent in, who do you think is more likely to come in?
Trent at the moment, just due to the value at being 8 million. But I get caught up with Salah, and I watch these videos of him in pre-season where he looks really, really fit, and he's like passing all these tests.
Trent's
and he's run this
cut his hair though.
I know, and I'm getting caught up in the hype, and I'm watching these Liverpool training videos. And I'm thinking, how on earth am I going without two of the best FPL assets of all time? On the back of, they finished the season so strongly as well, Liverpool. They've signed players which strengthen their midfield. Trent is playing in this new role which suits him so well. I almost feel like I'm crazy for not having Trent and Salah, but then I try and get them in a draft, and I have to drop the likes of Bruno, Rashford, Saka. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, well, I don't want to do that. So I feel like we've complained a lot about FPL's pricing this year, but the more I think about it, I'm actually like, it's quite clever, some of the pricing. It's forcing us to drop two of the best assets in FPL history.
Yeah, I do think the pricing later on in the season around double game weeks might be an issue, just because so many of the players are around the same price. That let's say you've got this draft, like Fernandes, Rashford, etc. Let's say, I don't know, Spurs got a double game week. It's very easy just to switch to Son because all the players are the same price. But I agree, for game week 1, I'm finding it a bit more difficult than I thought I would. And the thing with Trent, which I discussed on my draft video the other day, is when you drop him down to another defender, you almost don't need all the money. Like, you can make one upgrade, but that upgrade only costs 1 or 1.5, and the rest of the money's not really needed. Like, if you're happy with Mitoma, having Mitoma or the extra money for like a Sterling or a Maddison might not really matter if Mitoma plays enough minutes. So I'm struggling with that. I'm with you, though. I think if I was going to put one in, it would be Trent, because I think he's easier to put in. Salah's just a bit harder, but Salah is the one that I would want. That Bournemouth at home fixture in game week 2. But I have to keep reminding myself, at 85% ownership, I'm just going to captain Haaland everywhere. I'm not getting screwed over like I did last year. So I think he's one of those. It's one of those decisions that if you don't go with him in game week 1, you have to tell yourself you're not getting him in game week 2, no matter what happens. If he puts a hat trick past Chelsea, you can't buy him for Bournemouth at home. It's just too much work. So yeah, I'd be interested to see over the next couple of weeks whether the kind of template mindset kind of shifts with all of us to Liverpool, but we'll have to wait and see. I'm sure the first fixture when they play in pre-season, Salah gets a hat-trick or something, maybe we'll all change our mind. All right, final question is pre-season, which I know you kind of already mentioned, but we'll just go over it again. In a season that has many teams in transition, so I guess you've got the likes of Chelsea and Spurs in particular, players like Havertz at Arsenal as well, how much weight do you apply to pre-season friendlies? It goes on to say it's the only data we have on the new season, so for me it's more important than others perceive. So what do I know you said you don't rely on it that much, but what do you want to see in pre-season? Is there anything that would help your decisions for game week 1?
Yeah, I think players scoring goals generally doesn't bother me at all. I don't overly care about a player scoring a goal because they're playing against much weaker opposition. Both teams are experimenting. Neither team puts in full effort. I mean, the physiotherapist will literally tell you not to put in full effort. You don't want to go and exert yourself early on. So it's not really representative of exactly how the teams will play. But what I do like it for is in that question, they've said when it's a new manager or a new system, and if a player's scoring goals and looking good in under a new manager or in a new system, then yes, that will turn my head. For example, if Son or Sterling look really good in pre-season, not if they're scoring, I don't really care if they're scoring goals, but if they're getting in the right chances and they're getting in the right positions and they're creating chances and they look good, that makes me turn my head because I'm starting to think that under this new manager in this new system, they could be really good assets. So I'm looking more at like team level things and I'm looking more at tactics and systems and formations. I'm looking less so. I don't care that Bowen's got 5 returns in 3 games, for example. I know a lot of people are going crazy. I know Bowen can score goals. Bowen scoring goals doesn't surprise me. If Son scores a hat trick, I know Son can score a hat trick. Of course we do. It's more so where are they playing at the moment and how are they operating in their new system and their new team. For teams that aren't changing at all, for example, I don't know, looking at Arsenal, if Saka scores goals in pre-season, that doesn't make me more or less want him because he's going to be playing exactly the same role that he did last season. But Bruno Fernandes and Mason Mount, I've definitely got my eye on because I want to see how Mason Mount can affect Bruno. So yeah, it's more like team level stuff and changes in systems and formations.
Yeah, I completely agree. I actually disagree with part of the question where it says it's the only data we have for the new season. I mean, quite literally, yes, for 2023-24, but we got so much historical data. Like, we know Raheem Sterling generally is a really good player. We can see in the underlying stats, we can see how many goals and assists he scored for City. Maybe not so much for Chelsea, right? But we know there's a good player in there. The only thing we really want to know is he going to play every week? Is he first choice left wing? Does Pochettino fancy Mudryk more than Sterling? Which would surprise me, but it could happen. I think similar with Spurs, got a new manager. Last season they were playing wing backs. All of a sudden now they're probably going to have to play a back 4. Who plays where? I think I saw your tweet earlier where Ndombele lined up next to Maddison as the 2-8s. Now if he's going to play regularly, suddenly you got a 4.5 million midfielder. I don't care how many goals or assists he scores. I just care that he's getting minutes. I'm not sure he will start the season. But again, we can look at pre-season to get an idea of that. Does Højbjerg play in there? Bentancur's injured at the moment. So, yeah, I'm kind of with you. Like, Havertz is a player that I've not really considered because Arsenal have got so many solid options. You mentioned Martinelli. I've got Saka, Jesus, etc. But if Havertz is playing in a more advanced role, then maybe at 7.5, he's someone to look at. So, yeah, I'm with you. I don't agree with the data point. I think we got all of last season's data to see how good players are and all the previous seasons before that. But the 2 teams for me are Chelsea and Spurs. That's what I really want to see. I just hate the 2 opening fixtures. I don't think they're awful for either team, but I think they're just enough to put me off. I think Chilwell's maybe someone that I'll start with. Have you thought about Chelsea defence at all?
Yeah, on the draft before the one I sent you, I had Chilwell tucked first sub because I had a little bit of money in the bank. And I just like the idea of Spurs and Chelsea are going to smash it from game week 3 to game week 6. I can almost guarantee it because regardless of how good you think they are just excellent fixtures. So yes, you can say, well, in game week 3, I'll do Fernandes to Maddison. There you go. You've got 1 player now. It's still going to be difficult to try and get 4, 5, 6 players. So if you can already start with Maddison and tuck Chilwell first sub, immediately you're 2 transfers ahead of everyone else going into game week 3. So I don't like that about my current draft. I've currently got no Spurs, no Chelsea, because I agree with you. I think from game week 3, we're going to want their players.
Absolutely. You could switch Foden to Maddison.
I love Foden.
Nah, fair enough. We'll leave it there. Ross, thank you very much for joining me.
No worries at all. Thanks for having me on. And best of luck with your tinkering for the rest of pre-season.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of it. I'm actually going on holiday soon, but I'm still going to probably be tinkering while I'm away. If you haven't already checked out Ross's channel, it's FPL Raptor on YouTube. I'll leave a link in the description below. Obviously, you can just go and search for it on YouTube, so make sure you subscribe to that. When's Stormzy coming back on?
Oh, we're getting him. He's a busy man, unfortunately.
Is he? Can't believe that.
Yeah.
You think FPL would be the priority. Anyway, Stormzy's going to be on his channel at some point again, so make sure you check that out. Obviously, hit the like button, hit subscribe, and I'll catch you again soon.